Today we're going to look at some of the algebra capabilities of the TI-89, especially things that are not possible with the TI-84 series. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at taking a polynomial like this and factoring it, and our calculator will be able to do that. So we're going to turn it on. One thing I didn't talk about yesterday or in the previous video was clearing the screen. To do that, you can go to F1, and then you can either move the cursor down and highlight the clear home, or you can just hit the number 8 and it'll clear it out. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to see that under F2 it says Algebra. So we're going to press the F2 button, which is right here, and you can see that there are a variety of things you can do here. We're going to go ahead and look at factor, and then we're going to type in our polynomial. Close the parentheses and hit enter, and you can see that it factors it for us. So it's a very powerful thing. It saves you some time if you're able to use a calculator on a problem, and you don't have to sit there and try to do synthetic division or trial and error to factor, or factor by grouping, any of those things. So we can factor. The next thing is basically doing the exact opposite of that. So let's take a look at this expression. You can see that that's something that we would want to maybe multiply out if we don't need to have it in factored form. So we can do that on our calculators. Back to the algebra menu under F2, you can see number 3 there, which you can either hit 3 or move down and highlight it and hit enter. You can then type in, make sure you do the parentheses, 2x minus 3 squared, times 3x minus 5, close the parentheses, and then I'm going to close the parentheses on the expand command, hit enter, and it'll multiply it out for you. Okay? So these are some powerful tools of this calculator, but it gets even better. So for example, take a look at this crazy expression. It's got some trig in there. We can actually factor that using this calculator. So we're going to go clear that out. We're going to hit F2, factor, and then type in sine of x squared. So when I do this though, I need to put parentheses around the sign and square it like that. Minus 3 sine of x plus 2. And I can factor that, and you can see that it'll factor to sine of x minus 2, sine of x minus 1. So we can factor lots of things, not just polynomials. The next tool that we can use this calculator for is to solve equations. So let's solve this simple equation using our calculator. So maybe you saw it when we were into this menu. There is a solve command, and the way you type this in is a little bit different. So let's talk about that. There's my equation. The difference here is that you need to tell the calculator what you are solving for. So you're going to hit the comma button, which is right above the 9, and then type in the variable that you are solving for, and then close the parentheses, and it will solve it for you. The reason you have to do that is if you're using an expression that has multiple variables. So let's just do the same thing here, x plus 2 equals, and instead of saying 35, we'll say z. We can tell that to solve for x, and it'll solve it and give us z minus 2 over 3. So it can solve equations that have multiple variables in them, or just normal equations. Let's take a look at some more equations just to see what it looks like on the calculator. Let's look at a quadratic equation. We're going to look at x squared plus 8x plus 15 equals 0. So let's solve that. I'm just going to go like this. And you remember yesterday, I did it again yesterday. In the previous video, if you hit clear when you're in the middle, it'll delete everything after the cursor. And then we can type in our expression or equation. Now I should mention that the equal sign here is next to the parentheses, comma x to tell it what to solve for, and it will actually give you both answers to that quadratic. Okay, it can do more complicated quadratics. So let's say that we wanted to do this equation. I could type that in. Let's go to here, clear out the rest. And you should be practicing typing these things in so that you're familiar with how to edit something you've typed in, fix mistakes. Here you can see that for that quadratic, it would need the quadratic formula. It's not going to give you a nice answer. It's going to give you those answers. And now might be a good time to show you that if you do something like this, you can also do the approximate solution. So if you do the green diamond and then the enter button, which is the approximate equal to, it's going to give you the decimal approximations for those as well. Okay, it can do even more complicated things, such as exponential functions. So let's solve that. Remember, E is the diamond of the X button. Put that X in there. Plus 5 equals 12, comma, variable that I'm solving for. I remember, again, you're using the E that's here, not the letter E with alpha, and that would not work. You get the ln of 7, okay? Something interesting, if we tried to solve the equation instead of equaling 12, and we wanted to equal 0 instead, we could do that, but there is no solution to that. Whenever the calculator returns a false as your answer, that means that there is no solution, okay? This calculator can also solve inequalities. So let's solve this inequality. So it was x squared plus 4x minus 5 is greater than 0. And just so you can see, if I zoom in a little bit here, there are less than and greater than symbols above the 0 and the decimal point. And I should also point out that if you do diamond, so those are blue, so it'd be second and then those. If you do diamond and then those, that'll give you the equal to's. So I'll show you that back here. So if I do that, that's just greater than 0. But if I do the diamond, that's going to give me the greater than or equal to. So that's a little shortcut there that you can use. Still going to tell it that I'm solving for x. If I didn't put in that x, and I hit enter like that, you're going to get a too few arguments mistake, which is telling you that you need to put something else into the function, into the function that the calculator is using, which is the variable that you're solving for. And you can see that it says less than -5 or greater than 1. Okay, so that's inequalities. One last type of equation that we need to talk about. Look at my notes, make sure it is the last type of equation. Is everyone's favorite, trig equations. Okay, calculator's a little weird with trig equations. I'll show you what I mean. If I enter in that simple sine of x equals 0, whoops, I'm hitting escape instead of the arrow key. You get sine of x equals 0, comma, x, and I hit enter, you get that. And you see that there is an at symbol and then an n1. What that's telling you is that that at n1 can basically be any integer. An integer is a positive or negative whole number. Any integer times pi. So 0 pi, 1 pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi, -1 pi, -2 pi, and so on. Those would be what those are. The at's a little weird though, so trying to remember what that means. If you see that come up, just remember that that means that there are multiple answers here. With trig, you should know that anyway. But I will show you a way to kind of make it a little bit better. let's take a look at this equation. Oh, not that. There you go. We'll do sine of x equals 1/2. If I do that on the calculator just as is, you can see that I still get that at in there. And, you know, I maybe should have mentioned this. I don't know if it came up on any of the other ones. But if you have a really long answer, maybe there are 3 or 4 answers, if it's a degree 4 polynomial, you can highlight it and then move over and see the whole thing, go back and forth with the arrow keys. But you can see that both of these answers have that at end, which makes sense because we know that trig functions are periodic. So what we can do is, instead of looking at all of the answers, typically in problems that you'll encounter, you'll have an interval of where you're looking. Okay, so between 0 and 2 pi, that's the 1 full unit circle. That would be a typical interval that you can do. So what we can do is, on the calculator, if we go to the end after you've closed the parentheses of the solve command, we're going to hit this vertical bar right here. You might remember that as being an evaluating, you're evaluating something at a specific point, or something like that. This evaluating bar, it's sometimes called a pipe. We're going to use that. So let me go back to the screen here, and you can see it shows up there. And then we're going to put in our interval, so 0, and I'm going to use the is less than x is less than 2 pi. Okay. Notice that you have to do this using the inequality way of doing this. You can't type in interval notation or anything like that. You have to use the inequalities. And if I hit enter, you'll see that it just gives me the answers from 0 to 2 pi. So that's pi over 6 and 5 pi over 6 are your only answers for that. Okay. So that's using the pipe button, or the vertical bar evaluation button, to limit the interval that you're looking at. If we go back to one of our previous equations, this inequality, let's look at that, but I'm going to narrow it down and only look at an interval. So let me go up here. The calculator will save up to 30 entries. So you can go up here and remember that when you want to copy something, you just highlight it and hit enter, and it'll put it into where you're entering things in. So I'm going to put the evaluation, and let's say that I wanted to do it on the interval -4, 3. So I'm going to say -4, and make sure that when you use a negative, you use this negative button down here. Don't use a minus sign. If I were to use a minus sign, I'll show you what happens. It's less than x, it's less than 3. Syntax error, that's because you didn't use a negative sign. If I do that, it's only going to give me the answer that's between -4 and 3, which is -3. Okay. Seems kind of silly on that one, where you would find both answers. Maybe it would make more sense to go up and look at the other quadratic that we use, this one, because on this one, when there are decimal answers or irrational answers, putting in an interval, it can tell you which one's going to be on that interval without finding out what the decimal is. So the last thing I want to show you is, let's look at a super complex equation, one that you couldn't solve by hand. Sine of x plus 3 equals e to the x. But there is a solution if you think about what e to the x looks like when you think about the sine of x function shifted up 3. They do intersect. So there is a point where these are equal. So let's solve that. Let's go back here and delete all this. And let's solve sine of x, close the parentheses, plus 3 is equal to e to the x, like that. And I'm going to go ahead and hit enter now. You can see that, one, you get a warning saying that other solutions may exist. That usually comes up with trig functions. And you see that it says it's busy. And this is taking quite a while. If your calculator gets stuck and you want to stop it from doing all this work, you can hit the on button, and the on button will stop it while it's thinking, and you can either hit enter or escape, and that will I think actually escape makes it continue. If you hit enter, it'll break it and stop the calculator from trying to calculate. But we're going to do it again and see what it comes up with. Now again, you can see that this is taking a while. It is busy. And so what I'm going to show you after this finally gives us our solution is that it is possible, especially if you have an idea of what where the answer might be, that you could add on the vertical evaluation and say something like, well, let's do it from 1 to 2, and you can see that that will end up being much faster because it's not looking everywhere, and it'll give you the same answer. So that is, factoring, expanding, and solving equations, some of the algebra that this calculator is capable of, and that is all. See you in the next video.